Leaders have layers, shaped by stories and struggles that are often unseen. In each episode, we peel back those layers, hearing from leaders whose paths may look nothing like yours, yet whose insights will feel strikingly relevant. You'll walk away with fresh eyes, ready to disrupt the status quo. This is Outsider Unscripted. Welcome to this episode of Outsider Unscripted. Sadie and I are here today with our guest, George Hamilton, longtime friend, colleague, thought partner. George is a recently retired military officer, has a strong background in logistics, is an entrepreneur. Talk about some of that. And he lives in the Austin area with his wife and daughter. George, thanks for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
We often like to ask just origin story. If George was a superhero, not saying you're not, but if George was a superhero, what's the origin story? Where'd you come from? How'd you get here?
I think the short version of that is I grew up on farms and ranches in the American Southwest. As a kid, my father is a retired Army officer too. It's a family business. I'm a fourth generation guy. And at some point in all that, I decided I wanted to be an Army helicopter pilot, like my father before me. And so I went to Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University in order to achieve that end. And the War on Terror broke out somewhere right around the beginning of my junior year. And so the U.S. Army had other plans for me. So I turned out to be an artillery officer. Did that for about 10 years. Made a couple of trips to Iraq, trip to Afghanistan in the process there, and did everything from company command to fire support to some special operations liaison work, if you will. So did that, and then made the decision back in 2013 to leave the active component, joined the reserves to try my hand at a normal civilian life, if you will. And from there, I kind of worked my way through a company called Innovel that's now known as Costco Logistics, Nugistics, which was purchased by Pitney Bowes, and then Flex, and most recently Zencraft, which is a subsidiary of Bring, which is a final mile software provider. So most of that time has been in the commercial aspect of the business, whether it's been sales or account management. I've probably been my biggest focus is some in operations. But that's how I ended up here.
Curious about the difference in active component versus reserve. And for those maybe who aren't dialed into that, what was that transition like and how is it different? Shout out to all the reserve and guard components who basically maintain two jobs. I don't know if it's always two full-time jobs, but I know it consumes a lot.
Like feels like it. I can say that.
Yeah, that's great. What don't you miss? By the way, thank you for going the full career in your service to the country. But you've been out for a little bit and you're looking back. We were talking about some of the things that I know you don't miss just before this. What do you want to share? What don't you miss from being part of the Big Green Machine?
Oh, if just for anyone out there, I guess, that hasn't spent time in the United States Army, there was an old saying a long time ago that the Army does more before 9 a.m. than most people do all day, right? I cannot think of anything further from the truth. The bureaucracy and the shenanigans and, making a lot of things 10 times harder than they need to be for no particularly good reason. I don't miss any of that. I don't miss, really just the bureaucracy, I guess, without giving 10 examples. I don't miss that. What I do miss are the humans, because the military tends to be filled, for the most part, with really good humans who believe in something bigger than themselves, want to be part of something bigger than themselves. And I do miss having to solve problems, even of our own making, in the middle of the night with good people. Like there's something about being presented with a problem, no matter how stupid it is, and solving that problem with people that you care about, people that you like being around. I do miss that, even in the maximum silliness kind of way. But I don't miss the bureaucracy, and I don't miss I don't miss the time it took from me, candidly.
How are you using your time now? You're in a bit of a career transition pivot, both recently leaving the military, but also between jobs, doing a lot of discernment, a lot of reset, bit of a sabbatical, some might call it, or mini sabbatical. And what are you doing now, and what's the benefit?
Be at the risk of getting too philosophical about it. I'm between jobs here for the last 6 weeks or so, and it'll probably be a little bit of time before I go back to work. But I think the realization I'm having is that we tend to make most of our progress personally. This is for me. I'm painting with a very broad brush, but this is for me. We tend to make most of our progress as people. I'm not talking about degrees and certifications and titles or any of that. I'm talking about as human beings in the quiet places, the quiet spaces. And we don't get many quiet spaces. And I think what I've found, not only for myself, but others that I've talked to as they've gone through this, is when we get into that quiet space and we start to get confronted with some uncomfortable truths that maybe we've ignored for a number of years, instead of staying in that space and working through those things, we create noise so that we can escape having to deal with those truths. And it takes a little bit of time for your mind and your body and your nervous system to calm down enough to start thinking about those things if you've been going at it. And so for me personally, I went from, chief of training for a reserve unit and the GM of a software business and a full-time parent and all these things to none of that in about 4 months between retiring and moving between jobs and my daughter, moving out on her own. And so it was like somebody had reached over, unbeknownst to me, and just pulled the e-brake as hard as they possibly could. And I wasn't mentally prepared for that. But what I've found now, a few weeks in, is that my brain's a little quieter, and I'm able to think about things maybe more thoroughly. Is the right thing there? And I'm realizing that if I want to be good at whatever profession I choose to run with here, like, being calm and collected and thoughtful are incredibly important aspects of being a leader, regardless of whether it's business or the military or even your local softball team, if you're the team captain or something, right? So for me, the slowdown has been great. And then it gets very tenuous because you get bored. And then you start thinking about things that maybe you've ignored for a long period of time because they're unpleasant things to think about or work through. And then most of us, like I said, we create a bunch of noise and we kind of drown those uncomfortable thoughts out. So for me right now, I'm just at an interesting intersection in my life and I'm not entirely certain what to do with it. But if I have enough time to think that through, I'm sure I'll figure it out. So I'm trying to very consciously stay in that space, even if it's uncomfortable. And for the record, it's unpleasant. It is uncomfortable. And work my way through that because I think that's not only good for me, just personally and selfishly. I think it will make me a better husband, father, and hopefully leader when I go back to work.
I love hearing you share that of how it's it's not a great feeling, but how it's really good and that you're in it in the moment. Is there um, a feeling or thoughts that come to your mind that make you want to kind of escape? You don't have to share too vulnerably, but like, is there something that could speak to that other people may be feeling if they're in a similar situation?
Yeah, the one I would share, and the whole world doesn't need to understand my personal business. Like nobody wants that, me included. Um, but I think the hard part is when you get as busy as we get, when you go as hard as most people go, and we certainly have wholeheartedly adopted a hustle culture, you tend to allow things to atrophy that you shouldn't. And you could say relationships, your own physical or mental health, sleep, pick something. There's something we always end up sacrificing for the betterment of our careers. And at the risk of being too controversial here, I think I've come to the conclusion that that is just insanely stupid. And so the reason people get uncomfortable and they create noise, right? And like you could pick an example, your marriage, your relationship with your children, things that have suffered. If you have a relationship that suffered because you've hustled too much and too hard for things that candidly don't matter a whole lot, unless you own the business, okay? You get confronted with maybe you were not the spouse, the parent, the partner, the friend that you should have. And those thoughts are challenging to look back and say, hey, maybe I was not um, the partner I should have been in these scenarios. And then you kind of have to understand that maybe you've let people you really care about down because you've been spending all your time on things that aren't them. I would say that's the biggest discomfort because it makes you look in the mirror and it makes you think about how you've prioritized people and things. And for me, in a short period of time here, I've realized that I probably have done some damage to relationships in the interest of furthering my career. I have to repair those things. I own that. It's not other people's problem. That's mine. I did it. And you kind of have to sit with that thought and accept the fact that that's what you did and that you can change your behavior and do something different.
That's a really big statement. And like Sadie said earlier, thanks for being vulnerable. And I 100% know that's going to resonate with many listeners because they've had that moment of looking in the mirror. I also know it's going to resonate with others who are going to be looking in the mirror for the first time, as what you say puts a, if you will, concluding sentence on a paragraph that they've been writing in their head. And I appreciate that. I think that's going to be a lot of value. And for others, you're planting the first seed of where their priorities are.
I have a short anecdotal story, and I'll leave the names and company names out to protect the innocent. But I was working in supply chain, years ago, and we were in our peak season. And for anybody who's not familiar with that, that's just the holidays. It's right before Thanksgiving to mid-December. And I think a lot of people don't know that there's many retailers that'll do up to half of their annual sales in like that 4-week span. There's a reason for everybody that doesn't know why it's called Black Friday is it's because, from a ledger perspective, it used to get a lot of companies back into the black that were in the red to that point in the year. So it's a stressful time for supply chain organizations and, parcel providers, think FedExes of the world, warehouses, et cetera. And we all just kind of understand that the day after Thanksgiving, we're not going to see our families for about 3 weeks. And that's what it is. Just part of the job. Anyway, we had an operational screw up and it was going to cost a customer, man, it was like $100,000 or something. It was not an inconsequential sum of money. And I remember sitting with the business GM and the head of operations. And I said, look, we know we messed up. We got to call this customer. We got to tell them. We got to give them the money back. Like, it just is what it is. And, I remember the GM sitting there and he's like, well, that's right. That's the thing we should do. And the head of operations says, yep, we got it. We'll try and fix it. And I said, okay, I've got the customer, right? And we're leaving the office and the head of operations, who's a man that I still deeply admire to this day. His name's Christopher Cartelli. Put his arm around my shoulder and he said, George, he said, I want you to remember that an honest man's pillow is a very peaceful place to sleep at night. And that's one of those lessons that has just kind of resonated with me over the years and something I've tried to apply, not just to a business setting, but to my personal relationships and familial relationships too.
That's really great insight. Thank you for sharing that. I think that can be really difficult to do, especially when there's a lot of money on the line or, yeah, just your reputation on the line. I have one more question before we move on to the next thing, just about that. If there's people who are connecting with what you're saying and they're about to, and they're wanting to change and they're not wanting to have, their job be above their relationships, do you have a couple practical tips? I mean, I know you shared kind of looking in the mirror, if you want to kind of just share a couple tips for them and for yourself as you head back into the workforce.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things that I've done professionally that I'm just bringing into my personal life. I have, knock on wood, I have a really strong professional network, whether it's the military, it's business, it's, other random people that I've stayed in touch with over the years. And I learned when you run into a good person, a really good person, this is not to speak ill of the broader population. It's not what I'm doing. But when you run into a really good person, I've always found it wise to, like, if you get along, maintain that relationship. I've gotten feedback from people that's like, hey, you're really great at networking. You're really good at remembering to call people and check in. And I said, well, yeah, because I put reminders on my calendar to do it, right? Like, I'm going to call Jamey today and see what Jamey's up to today. I've always done that professionally, but now I'm just doing it personally. Like, it's easy to forget, right? And so I literally have just put time on my calendar. And then the other thing that I've done is I know everybody has people that they care about in their circles, their tribes, that they try and stay in touch with. When somebody crosses my mind for one reason or another, I just pick up the phone and call them if I've got a minute. And I'll just tell them, like, hey, man, you were just crossing my mind. I just called to see what's going on, how you're doing. So I've kind of given into that too. And then the last thing is I've gotten way more deliberate for my wife and my daughter about time that is committed to them, period. Don't care about a work meeting, not to be off color here, but unless somebody's dead, you don't get to violate that space. And when they gave me feedback, that's what they wanted. They wanted to feel like they had my full attention. And I think that's a completely fair ask, right? So you go back to, like, having to look yourself in the mirror and realize that, in my case, my wife and daughter never truly felt like they had my full attention, which is a pretty horrible thing to have to sit there with and think about. And so it's nothing revolutionary. I literally just block out time. And if somebody's weighing on your mind, just pick up the phone and call them. There may be a reason there.
Yeah. I've had a few times I've had someone come to my mind and I call and they're like, you have no idea. And they're crying, like, and they really needed the call. It's a little different, but it makes me think about people, the saying of how people don't remember what you said or what you did, but they remember how they felt with you. And that makes me think of the presence that you're talking about, of like being more present with your family, being present with your employees when you're with them, and how that really can impact people.
It really can. I think, for all of us, we've all had many moments in our lives where we just needed somebody there, right? Just not even to talk to us, maybe just to be physically present. And to your point, Sadie, like, I've made a couple of those phone calls, and, what I thought was going to be a 5-minute check-in turned into a 2-hour session. Because that individual had a lot weighing on them, right? And I've had people do the same for me. And I always remember when my phone rings and it's, oh, I haven't talked to John Boy in 6 months. And man, that was great. Like, you come away from it feeling elevated. You feel better. So I think that just ties back into everything I'm trying to do right now in my plethora of spare time is I'm trying to refocus my mind on it's the people, stupid. So if I have a slogan for this period, like, it's that. I don't speak to myself particularly kindly. I'm not sure I'd want myself as a coach, but that's my slogan.
It's interesting you're talking about time blocking and the intentionality, and Sadie talked about the being present. And as I'm listening, I'm thinking of just a lot of things that I know about you and your rhythms, and connecting it to listeners, and where some of us are hearing this and we think about, like, man, okay, you're in this moment of we'll call mini sabbatical, where you're getting a lot of time, and like you talked about nervous system and the actual time it takes to eliminate some of the noise. And like, gee whiz, like, I don't know when I'll be able to do that, or when I will do that, or any of that. And yet I know that this also follows a lot of deliberate moments along the way that you've carved out time to be more at rest or to invest in things or to pursue hobbies that are life-giving. And I wonder if you could talk for a bit on just what some of those are. And for our backgrounds, of course, there's the saying, better a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. And I feel like I see that with you. And so my mind's going to the travel you've done, to photography, to the veterans initiatives. And for those listening, I'm a little bit in the presence of greatness here, because it's two creatives on the other end of this, between Sadie and George, who are able to create incredible experiences through visual medium, and who are world travelers. And so I would love to listen a bit of just how all that has tied together for you, and how that has applied.
Yeah, uh, my natural mother, I say that because she passed away when I was very young, and I had a wonderful, wonderful stepmother about 10 years later. But my natural mother was a professional photographer, so I come by the photographer's eye, I guess, honestly. And it was always something that fascinated me. And so I picked up a camera here and there over the years. Got a little more serious about it in college. And then from there, when I was very young, my wife figured out I had a fear of deep water. I'm sure there's a psychological phobia associated to that. I'm not sure what the word is. But not shallow water, just deep water, right? Like stuff where I couldn't see the bottom. And so my wife, who's just an incredible human, decided the best way past that was through it, and she signed me up for scuba lessons. And the intent there was just to get me out of my comfort zone a bit. I'm not sure, 577 dives later, if she knew that was going to become an obsession. But it kind of did, and it went from me being afraid of deep water to me being, 100 feet deep with a 30-pound camera rig chasing around a 2 centimeter long sea slug. I'm not sure anybody saw that coming. But look, diving and photography are probably my core hobbies. My wife would tell you that my hobby is hobbies, but my core hobbies. And I think the reason it's resonated so deeply with me is, one, a dive is an extremely quiet place, right? Like, there's communication equipment. You can put that on if you want. And I've been offered that before, and I usually offer some sort of expletive-laden retort. I'm not looking for a radio in my ears while I'm underwater, right? So it's a very quiet place, and you get a very rhythmic set of sounds and motions, and the ocean is not silent. Like, there's things that happen down there. So that's one. Two, I think dropping off the edge of a reef wall or dropping into the blue, you get this sense of how small you are, and it happens every dive. I've fallen off the side of a boat 500 plus times, and every dive, that first breath, it's like, man, it's big down here. And so I think it helps maintain that sense of wonder that you can lose in our little suburban enclaves and our daily urban commutes and all of that. Like, the world's massive. And so it helps maintain a sense of wonder. And then you just run into really weird critters, a lot. And I love photography because I'm more of a documentarian than I am probably other types of photography, right? But I think photography is such a beautiful medium to share rarer things with people in a way that they can really absorb them. It's harder to do that in a film. It's harder to do that in a painting, but a really good photograph gives you a sense of place and a sense of story. And no matter where you walk on the planet, no matter what a piece of dirt you're standing on, there's hundreds of thousands of years of history in that piece of dirt. And I think photography does such a phenomenal job of bringing a moment to an audience and having them stay with that moment for a little while. So those two hobbies are technical to a degree, and I do like technical. I do like checklists. I am an artilleryman, after all. But there's a big sense of adventure with both of them. And you can take a camera and find adventure in your own backyard. Go hunt down some tiny snail on the side of a tree and see what he's up to that day, right? So in sum, like, it gets me out of my house. It gets me out of my routine. It gets me to wild places and lets me see wild things. And it reminds me that I am a very small thread in a very large tapestry. And that's okay to be a very small thread in a very large tapestry. In some ways, I find that very comforting.
So well said of the slowing down. And I've been scuba diving just like 5 times. And when you were talking about that, I was remembering just the like slight panic at first where I was like, oh, whoa, there's so much down here. And then just settling in and you just, yeah, you hear the ocean, you hear the critters, you hear yourself breathing. And it was so peaceful. And I would love to have gone 600 times. That sounds amazing. And I love how you said the keeps the wonder of you, like the wonder of the world as you're looking around. And it's what I love about photography too, is it's capturing that moment. It's seeing how really amazing everything is, like the slug on the side of the tree, as you mentioned, like that is really, yeah, wonderful. But we miss that in the hustle and the bustle.
Great stuff, George. I'm curious, the statement that like culture takes a year, a leader comes in, maybe a new leader or leader that has decided, oh, man, I want to make an impact, maybe change course a little bit. Timelines. I'm curious what your experience has been working in investment-backed companies, whether private equity, venture capital. I know you've got experience in those. There are some challenges that are the same as say, an established company or different type of organization, and some challenges that are pretty unique, and their timelines are often ambitious.
Yeah. Look, there's some hard realities about working for a VC or PE backed group. And the reality is they gave you a bunch of cash and they expect growth in return, right? They expect their investment to pay off for them at some point. And that makes sense. It's just a math problem. So there's some downsides to that. There's some downsides to not being able to necessarily build a team in this deliberate way that you want to. There's some downsides in, hey, I don't think we can grow as fast. And the answer by and large is we don't care. Find a way to do it. That's just the reality of that game. And the other reality is most startups fail. I feel like we've forgotten that in a lot of the kind of COVID era, a million different unicorns sort of deal. But most of them fail and it's difficult. But what I will tell you can work in those environments is you usually hire a lot of people fairly quickly. So you're usually not you're usually not inheriting like a legacy team that kind of sort of wants to be there, maybe doesn't believe in what's going on, right? You're usually starting from scratch. The people that are drawn to those type of organizations are very action biased people. They tend to be very sharp people. And then that stress, not to throw the 433rd military analogy in here, but the stress of that environment causes them to bond very fast. And there's good news and bad news there. I've been through both. Team gets together, you hire a bunch of folks, everybody bonds, and the team like just takes that year-long timeline and turns it into 8 weeks somehow. I've seen that happen. But I've also seen teams that like can't bond because they have the wrong team members. And then you've got to make a bunch of challenging decisions to get the right people in the boat, so to speak. So it's a double-edged sword. You can see teams come together exceptionally quickly in those environments. I've been a part of those. It's a lot of fun. And you end up bonding with those people in a way that you stay in touch with them years later. I think the term is trauma bonding. That's what the U.S. military does. Just throws you out in a muddy field in the middle of the night and, you bond. That's how it works. So you see some of that in startups. You do. I would say that in my experience, having worked for some larger companies and some startups, the interpersonal relationships are a lot more interpersonal in startup environments. That's been my experience.
So we've talked from different angles leadership, and I'm curious what your concise definition of a leader currently is. What is a leader?
Leading people is accomplishing goals or objectives by, with, and through others, while at the same time caring for and developing. But I think that by, with, and through others thing is important. I've learned that lesson so many times. As a leader, I'm not saying I'm not doing anything, but I'm accomplishing things by, with, and through others. And if I expect others to accomplish the things I'm asking them to accomplish, then I need to ensure that they're being cared for, developed, and provided the tools necessary to do what I'm asking them to do.
I want to ask a question specifically to the moment that you're in right now between jobs. We were joking before the podcast about what we should say. Are you unemployed, or are you like, how do we want to frame you for everyone? Fact of the matter is, there are lots of folks right when we're recording this and when it's going to be aired who are in this really sometimes disconcerting period of time. And you're in a particular moment as a senior leader, lots of experience. What would you say to others that are in this moment? Some of them very much unexpectedly, some of them by decision. I recently saw, I think for the first time, I saw a professional who had on his LinkedIn resume, if you will, 2 sabbaticals that he articulated the benefit he'd had from them and whatnot, which I thought was super cool.
Yeah.
But what would you say to those that are in the similar boat that you're in or about to be?
You are worth much more than your paycheck. No matter how stressful that lack of income can be, and I get it, one point was trying to figure out how to put food on the table while walking and working at Blockbuster Video. I get it. And yes, that ages me. I get that too.
What's Blockbuster?
Right. It was a magical place 20 years ago. That's what it was. But it's immensely stressful, right? We all got bills to pay. We all got things we got to do there. But you are worth much, much more than your paycheck. That's thing one. You're not going to feel that way when you're going through it. You're going to feel like your value has plummeted, right? And you're probably going to think that that's what your spouse thinks, or your friends, or your kids, that like they look at you as a paycheck. They don't, by the way. And if you express to them that that's what you thought, they will also probably get very upset. Not that I'm speaking from recent experience at all. You're worth more than your paycheck. That's one. 2, the quiet spaces are uncomfortable because we don't know how to navigate them anymore. We've lost our ability to do that, relearn that skill. That's 2. 3 is be comfortable in your own company. Like, I think most of us are absolutely terrible at being alone. Learn how to be alone. Learn how to enjoy your own company. That's a life skill. And at periods of your life, you will end up alone. It'll happen. So have the skills necessary to navigate that in a healthy way. Look after your mind and your body. If you find yourself unemployed for a period of time, move. Physically move. Go to the gym, hike. I don't care. Whatever it is that gets your heart rate up, go do that. It is too easy to turn into a lump on the couch and feel sorry for yourself. But the more you move, the better you sleep. And the better you sleep, the clearer your mind is. And the clearer your mind is, the less likely it is to tell itself stupid things. So move, right? Learn to be in the quiet spaces. Learn to appreciate your own company. Know that you are somebody simply for the fact that you exist, not for the paycheck that you make. And then I think the final thing, at the risk of just throwing a bad cliche into the middle of all of this, is like, this too shall pass. It's not permanent. Okay. The expiration date may be out there a ways. I know people that have, good people that went 9 months trying to find a job. I get it. But ultimately it'll end and you'll find yourself in another role. And then I think the very last thing I will say is, unless you are about to start your own business, go to work for some nonprofit whose cause you deeply, deeply believe in, your next job will not make you any happier than your last one did. So do not fall into the mental trap of, man, as soon as I get a good job, I'll be happy again. No, you won't. You won't. The next one is the same as the last one. I got bad news, boys and girls. If you work in corporate America, they're all the same job. Okay? Like, don't do that. Find things that bring you happiness that are not your method of employment. And all of that sounds like something that's probably been said on a podcast at least 2 million times. But I'm telling you, it's true. Move your body. Get comfortable with your own company. When you find another job, understand that is not the thing that is going to fix any mental health challenges.
Appreciate that, George. A question we like to ask towards the end of each guest is what are you excited about right now? What do you want people to know about? Whether that could be a side business, a book, new venture, come work for our company. It's amazing, whatever it is. And I'm going to preempt you because you probably won't say this one, but I feel like you should talk about your air quote side business and a little bit about the story. And then that's my choice for you. And then you can also add your own choice.
So I do run a small fine art photography business. I am atrocious at keeping up with the website and other things. But it's called Spear 3 Photography. It's the word spear and the number 3. That name came from 2 places. One, I just couldn't convince myself to name it George Hamilton Photography because that feels like every single other photography outfit on the planet. And 2, I just wanted something interesting. And so, back to growing up on cattle ranches own and trademark their own cattle brands. And, my family's been ranching for a long time, but in somewhat recent history here, kind of stopped. Ranches got sold, right? My brothers and I were not real keen on taking over ranching operations. And so we have this brand, it's called Spear 3. It was owned by the family. I was sitting with my dad years ago and I was like, man, I just can't come up with a good name for this company. And he's like, well, here's our cattle brand. He's like, we're not using it. And so I gave it to another good friend of mine, John Rigsby, who took the time to redesign it a little bit. And he incorporated, an aperture into it and some C rope and some other things to kind of represent who I am. And thus was born Spear 3 Photography. And there is a website. You're certainly welcome to buy things. I'm not even sure I sell things on that website anymore. But if you want to buy something, just reach out to the contact. And that's, if you see something you like on Instagram too, call me. But I don't do mass production prints. I started down that road and it just felt like a violation of the art form. I can't tell you why. Not sure that's true for everybody. It just felt that way for me. And then I had a good mentor of mine that was like, look, man, I need you to stop underselling other photographers. Stop selling cheap crap. You're an artist, you're not an Amazon print shop. And that kind of just hit me. We were storm chasing at the time, which is another random hobby. And so I kind of moved myself into the fine art side of things. So I don't sell 50 images a year. I probably sell 5. And I get some fascinating messages when I quote people about the cost of that art. But yeah, that's my little side hustle. It's a fine art deal. If you see something you like or something you want, we will custom print, custom frame, and ship it to you.
Some What else? What else excites you? Do you want people to know about?
Oh, well, there is one thing, and I'm always going to do the advertisement for Creative Vets for anybody who is not familiar with that outfit. It's CREATIVETS. They are a veteran nonprofit headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee. And what they do, without turning it into a 5-minute spiel, is they teach veterans with PTSD, TBI, and other injuries the arts. So they have a songwriting program that's their chief program. They do sculpture, they do painting. And recently, in the last few years, I helped them found a photography program specifically focused on astrophotography, which is my second favorite kind of photography, right behind underwater. And so we've been running an astrophotography program in partnership with the University of Texas and McDonald Observatory here it'll be our 5th year this year. And then we've taken veterans to other places. We've been to, we've been to Moab, we've been to Big Bend. I'm forgetting where in Idaho we just went, but it's way up in a dark sky preserve up there. And so we take veterans out and we teach them how to observe and image the night sky. If you got some cash in your pocket that's just burning a hole in it, you're looking to contribute to something, go check those guys out. They're a good bunch.
Yeah, thanks for that. And as a fellow veteran, it's I'm always excited when you share the stories and the impact that Creative Vets has, and certainly your partnership with them. It's really awesome.
Yeah. Well, I loved hearing more of your thoughts and your experiences. We did have a reminder of you're potentially going to paramedic school. Is that something you still wanted to touch on?
Forgot about that.
Yeah, I can give you a blurb on that. I've done a lot of self-reflection in terms of like what I've done professionally for the last, call it 22, 25 years. And, I find myself in this place where I do want to work in supply chain. I do enjoy that. But I do find myself asking like, man, I'm really struggling with a sense of purpose. And that's more recent. And I think the reason that's more recent is because I retired from the reserves. And so even if what I was doing in business America didn't have a grander purpose, my reserve work did. And so I think it kind of scratched that itch. What I've learned about myself over the last quarter century or so is everybody needs something different in their day-to-day job, right? For some folks, that really is the money. Like the money is the thing, right? For some folks, it's a title. For me, I have to feel as though I'm contributing to something bigger than myself, which may sound like the worst humble brag of all time caught on recorded here. But I do need some sense of purpose. I need to do my best to help others who maybe can't help themselves. And that was the Army for me for a long time. And so I've always had this desire. I've always had this immense admiration for paramedics and what they do, where, they go from drinking a cup of coffee and shooting the breeze to just life and death scenarios in a matter of minutes. And I think they just provide something that is incredibly necessary for our communities. And so I've contemplated just saying the hell with all of this and going to paramedic school and doing that. And it might be an outside option right now, but it's not off the table.
That's awesome. I can see why, from what you shared, that would be an ideal situation of something new to try, to challenge yourself, and to be of service to others. So thank you for sharing. I'm excited for whatever is next for you and look forward to hearing. You'll probably have some deep, insightful thoughts that we could probably have another episode in another month.
For anybody who's interested in diving in general, I'm getting an opportunity to go dive Socorro next month, which is a volcanic island chain about 250 miles off the tip of Baja. We live on a boat, and its claim to fame is seafaring manta rays, dolphins, plethora of sharks, and then we're trying to hit the window where the humpback whales come through with their newly born calves. And I'm gonna be dead honest with you. If I catch an image of a humpback whale and her calf that's worthwhile, you can probably just drown me right there, because that's all I needed to get knocked out.
That
Jamey, it
is
sounds like
absolutely.
an outsider trip that should come join along and we
Yeah.
can document
Yeah.
the journey.
Yeah,
We
we got
I'll
to
be
figure
there.
this out.
So
We got to figure this out for sure. George, thanks for spending time. Always great to sit with you, to think with you, to hear your melodious, calming voice, and yeah, we appreciate you.
I really appreciate you guys giving me opportunity, and thanks again for the conversation. I really enjoyed it.
Really
Have a good
enjoyed
one.
it. Thanks, George. Thanks for joining us today. Follow along on our YouTube where we release our episodes early. We hope today's conversation inspired you, and we'd love to hear what insights you took away. So please comment below, and we look forward to seeing you next time.